Tony Blair calls for Britain to rise up against Brexit. The former Prime Minister says people didn't know what they were really voting for and should have a chance to change their minds.
People voted without knowledge of the terms of Brexit. As these terms become clear, it is their right to change their mind.
I urge the British people to rise up and turn off the TV next time Blair comes on with his condescending campaign.
Also tonight, another blow for Donald Trump. The president's pick for a top security job turns him down. Tears from UKIP's leader and an apology for false claims about Hillsborough. And the woman marrying the homeless man she met outside her bookshop more than 40 years ago.
This is the ITV Evening News with Ranveer Singh.
Good evening. Tony Blair returned to the political stage today to urge people to rise up and block Brexit. The former Prime Minister claimed people had voted it through without understanding the consequences. He also blamed the Labour Party, which he used to lead, for allowing it to happen. But pro-Brexiteers hit back, with Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson saying people should rise up and turn Blair off the next time he's on TV. Our Deputy Political Editor Chris Shipp on the Brexit battle.
Remember Tony Blair, the former Prime Minister, the pro-European, the social reformer, who rather had his reputation trashed by the Iraq War. Despite all that, he re-entered the political debate today in a big way. Big because he said some things about Brexit few others would dare. People, he said, didn't know what they were voting for.
I want to be explicit. Yes, the British people voted to leave Europe, and I agree the will of the people should prevail. But the people voted without knowledge of the terms of Brexit. As these terms become clear, it is their right to change their mind.
And if people thought that voting Brexit would help the NHS or cut immigration, Mr Blair had another blunt message. It won't.
It is highly unlikely, frankly, that they're taking the jobs of British-born people in other parts of the country.
And who is to blame for holding the Brexit cheerleaders to account? Mr Blair blamed the anti-European press as well as the man who now leads Labour.
The second challenge is the absence of an opposition which looks, on the polling, capable of beating the government. The debilitation of the Labour Party is the facilitator of Brexit. I hate to say that, but it's true.
In conclusion, he said, the will of the people can be altered.
Prime Minister, will you take the advice of Tony Blair?
Theresa May refused to be drawn on the speech of one of her predecessors. She welcomed the French Prime Minister to Downing Street earlier, but she let her Foreign Secretary do all the talking.
I respectfully say to Tony Blair, those who call on the British people to rise up against Brexit, I urge the British people to rise up and turn off the TV next time Blair comes on with his condescending campaign.
In the Sedgefield constituency, Mr Blair used to represent 58% of voters chose Leave last year. And today the voters of County Durham didn't much appreciate being ticked off by their former MP.
I think he's a fool, he's an idiot. He should accept what the public is saying.
We voted Leave, and that's how it should be. I wish they'd just give up, all of them.
I voted for Brexit, and I don't take any notice now of what Tony Blair says.
Want to listen to me? Don't listen to me.
He did admit today he is expecting a volume of abuse, and on that he's probably not wrong. Tony Blair said today that he had a right to speak, just as voters have a right to ignore him. But remember, he wasn't calling for a different type of Brexit, he was calling for no Brexit at all. And the reason for that is because he thinks nearly half the country voted to stay in the EU. They, he says, have been unrepresented so far, and he is the man to represent them.
Chris Shipp, thank you. President Trump's administration has been plunged into further turmoil after the man he wanted as his national security advisor turned down the job. Retired Admiral Robert Harwood said it was because of personal reasons. Well, tonight the president has just arrived in South Carolina, where he's visiting a Boeing factory, but he is facing a growing backlash after his extraordinary attack on the media yesterday. Our Washington correspondent Robert Moore has this report.
The president left the White House this morning clutching the hands of two of his grandchildren, heading first for an aircraft factory in South Carolina and then for a weekend at his own Florida resort. He leaves behind a Washington establishment still in a state of near disbelief over yesterday's wild ride of a press conference in which he berated the media.
Because the press honestly is out of control. The level of dishonesty is out of control.
And threatened those leaking information.
The people that gave out the information to the press should be ashamed of themselves. Really ashamed.
Mr. President, today he reached outside of the traditional media and delivered his message via Facebook.
We are not here for the benefit of bureaucrats, consultants, or pundits. We are here to work for you, and only for you, the American people.
Though the White House is adrift is beyond doubt. First, General Mike Flynn, his national security advisor, was forced out. And now retired Admiral Robert Harwood, who Trump wanted in the job, has taken the extraordinary step of refusing to serve.
We have a lot to talk about. It is our top story. There's some
the US media was certainly stunned by yesterday's performance.
That would have been a really funny hour or so of television if you weren't president of the United States.
Even an anchor on Trump-friendly Fox News decided to air his own outrage.
No, sir. We are not fools for asking this question, and we demand to know the answer to this question. You owe this to the American people.
But to head out of Washington, this is Harper's Ferry in West Virginia, is to see again that Trump is doing what he does best, dividing opinion.
I think when they say give him a chance, they need to do just that. He may be green around the ears, but, you know, with compassion and prayer, this man is going to make it.
It's kind of scary. He doesn't really seem like he's got it together at all.
The president will be back here next week, and it may get only rockier as he plans to issue a new version of his controversial travel ban. Well, there is also emerging is this 11-page memo from the Department of Homeland Security, which suggests that there is a plan, or has been a plan, to use and deploy the National Guard to round up millions of undocumented workers. That kind of militarization of immigration policy would, of course, be vastly controversial. The White House today saying it's 100% not true, but nevertheless, this does appear to have been the point of discussion and debate.
Indeed. Thank you. Robert Moore, live in Washington. Thank you. Here, UKIP leader Paul Nuttall was visibly moved today as he apologised for false claims on his website that he'd lost close friends in the Hillsborough disaster. Addressing delegates at the party's spring conference in Bolton, he accepted it was his fault, but he attacked what he described as a smear campaign against him before next week's Stoke by-election. From Bolton, our political correspondent Paul Brand reports.
Why should anyone believe what you say, Mr. Nuttall?
His first conference as UKIP leader, and Paul Nuttall came to deliver not just a speech, but an apology. Sorry, to an extent, for false claims on his website that he'd lost close friends at Hillsborough.
Firstly, I take the blame for the fact that I failed to check what was put up on my website in my name. That is my fault, and I apologise. But I do not apologise for what is a coordinated, cruel and almost evil smear campaign. It has been a tough week for me, but I will not allow them to break me, and I will not allow them to break UKIP.
Their forgiveness was unanimous. Enough to bring a tear.
Thank you, I'm a bit overwhelmed. Thank you very much.
But he left not sorry enough to give any interviews. Can't you clear up a few things?
I've said absolutely everything I'm going to say on the subject. I've spoken to the people who mattered about this, and that's it.
There's still lots of questions to be answered there.
I was at Hillsborough. I've got witness statements.
And that's not his only backup. Virtually nobody in UKIP thinks he's done any wrong.
I would say, well done, Labour. You set this up extremely well.
Well, didn't he set it up for himself? He employed that press officer. She wrote the press release on the website.
Do you know something? There's not one of us in politics that hasn't been embarrassed by something written on our website.
You're both from Liverpool. How do you think this has gone down at there?
I don't think it's helped, to be honest with you, but we've just got to get over that.
I think he's open, he's honest. I think he's been vilified.
So for now, Paul Nuttall still has the rapture of his party, but the bigger test is whether he gets the same reception among voters. Paul Brand, ITV News, Bolton.
Marmite manufacturer Unilever has rejected a bid for what would be the second biggest takeover in corporate history. Unilever, whose brands also include Dove and PG Tips, was offered £115 billion from US firm Kraft Heinz. Unilever turned the proposal down, but Kraft says a deal is still possible. Some of the UK's biggest employers' groups have called on the government to abandon controversial changes to business rates. From April, many firms in England face steep increases linked to their property's value. Ministers insist it is fair and 600,000 businesses will pay no rates at all. But Juliet Bremner went to St Albans, where rocketing property prices have left many pubs and shops fearing for their future.
Regulars at The Boot in St Albans are being asked to back a new campaign to save their pub, which is facing a 51% increase in its business rates from April. Landlords across the city are being presented with similar eye-watering hikes, so they've joined a growing rates revolt to force the government to rethink.
Talking about an increase of nearly £40,000, so that's like a couple of full-time members of staff or a new manager. That's equivalent to about 22,000 pints of beer extra we'd have to sell just to pay for this one tax increase.
This is the first revaluation for 7 years instead of the normal 5. The government claims the rates for 3/4 of businesses will stay the same or fall. But rising property prices in the southeast means businesses like those in St Albans will go up, while those in struggling towns such as Blackpool could fall by as much as 50%. In a prosperous place like St Albans, virtually every business is going to face a steep rise. And critics predict that it could be the single biggest blow to the high street since the financial crash. Although valuations can be appealed, groups representing some of the biggest retailers in the UK today complained the new system was unfair, while smaller independent shops fear they are being hit hardest.
We take pride in the fact that we have so many independent businesses here. We're worried that, the effect on these businesses will mean that we just become like any other town with big chains taking over with no, independence here anymore.
In the pubs, they're signing a petition calling for a fundamental review that would use profit margins, not property prices, to spread the burden of rates more evenly. Juliet Bremner, ITV News, St Albans.
Still to come on the ITV Evening News. The technology using artificial intelligence to help older people keep their independence. And Wenger under pressure. Is it the beginning of the end for the Premier League's longest-serving football manager? Those stories and more after the break. Welcome back. Last night we reported how advances in artificial intelligence are being used to help children with autism. But AI could also have a positive impact on the elderly by extending the length of time they can live on their own. Our science correspondent Alok Jha reports now on how Dutch scientists are developing the technology to keep people active and healthy for longer.
It looks like a regular apartment.
At this laboratory in the Netherlands, everything is designed to allow older people to live by themselves for longer.
So this is the kitchen, which again looks like a normal kitchen.
In the kitchen, the counter is easily adjustable, and a jug even tracks how much water you're drinking. And if you're worried about your health, a mini heart monitor can help diagnose problems.
It will make a measurement of your heart rate, and if it's abnormal, then it will send it to the cardiologist, who can then come into action right away. The aim is to have people live at home independently, which is what they value and want, without needing to intervene, by example, by sending community nurses or by sending them to a nursing home.
They're also working on robotics here. You press that and your finger just moves by itself.
Yeah, it does.
It's a very strange feeling. It's called the Iron Hand, and it's for people who've lost their ability to grip. People like Ina, who suffered a stroke 5 years ago. Before you had this hand, how difficult was it to just pick up a cup or do anything by yourself?
Heel moeilijk. So it supports you in doing a lot of things at home and makes you more independent. Without the glove, you're scared. When you lift up something heavy, you will let it drop to the floor.
And in the future, scientists want to integrate artificial intelligence into homes to learn how people live and watch out for problems. Facial recognition algorithms, like this one developed in the UK, could detect the first signs of sadness or depression, which are major health concerns for older people who live alone.
The main difference is in the way people smile. In depression, the smiles get more polite, and this is can be detected automatically.
One day, artificial intelligence will be an everyday part of a doctor's toolkit, diagnosing and keeping people healthy for longer. Alok Jha, ITV News.
Football and Arsene Wenger says he will still be a manager next season, but not necessarily at Arsenal. He's been at the club since 1996 and won 3 league titles, but Wednesday's Champions League defeat reminded fans they've been trophyless for far too long. And even he now appears to be questioning his future, as our sports editor Steve Scott reports.
Leaves it for Thomas Müller. 5.
Arsenal have capitulated before, of course, but those who know Arsene Wenger well say they've never seen him so deflated after a defeat. That prompted speculation about his immediate plans. He admitted today they might lie elsewhere.
No matter what happens, I will manage next season. Is it here or somewhere else? You know, that's absolutely for sure. But on a night like that, of course, I hate defeat and I hate to lose games, and I want to do extremely well for this club.
Arsene Wenger joined Arsenal in 1996. He's won the Premier League 3 times, although the last of those was almost 13 years ago. And he's lifted the FA Cup 6 times, most recently in 2015. During Wenger's reign, Arsenal have qualified for the Champions League every year, but they've never won it.
It's not like before I arrived, Arsenal has won 5 times the European Cup. They've never won it, you know. And they played maybe 10 games in the whole history of the club, so you have as well to take into perspective some demands.
Arsenal fans who believe change here will bring instant success could do worse than reflect on what happened at one of their bitterest rivals, Manchester United, a few years ago when they lost their long-serving manager, Sir Alex Ferguson. In sport, as so often is the case, be careful what you wish for.
Whatever happens, Wenger's legacy is assured. What we don't know, though, is if it will include a new chapter written somewhere other than in North London. Steve Scott, ITV News.
Hundreds of mourners gathered in Huddersfield today for the funeral of 'Allo 'Allo actor Gordon Kay. Family, friends and former co-star Vicky Michelle were among those to attend the ceremony. Kay died last month at the age of 75. And finally tonight, they say love moves in mysterious ways. Even, it seems, finding romance with a homeless man rifling through your bin. Joan Neininger formed an extraordinary friendship with Ken Selway when he was living on the streets of Gloucester 40 years ago. Now, both in their 80s, they're getting married. Rupert Evelyn went to meet them.
42 years since she took pity on a homeless man outside her shop. Joan Neininger and Ken Selway are about to say I do. Preparing with family for tomorrow's wedding, they're also reflecting on a remarkable life journey.
Everybody likes Ken. Everywhere he goes, everybody likes him, mainly because he laughs a lot and has it, you know, even when things aren't rather difficult and aren't so funny, really.
Those tricky times for Ken came after the war, when he ended up on the streets in London and Gloucester. Joan fed him sandwiches and helped him get on top of his schizophrenia. She was married, but her husband accepted Ken as a friend.
Godsend. Godsend. Because, well, when I was on the street, it was terrible.
cold wind, rain. Now I got this.
The relationship developed after Joan's husband died, to the point that she realised she needed a little more than a friend.
I wanted to be with him. I was only on my own. As I said, I wasn't happy. I said, if I asked you to marry, would you marry me? Would you? And he laughed. He thought it was funny. No, it was so funny, you know.
Now all that's left is to tie the knot. Owen practiced the poignant words to the song they hope to sing together tomorrow.
And I love you so. People ask me how I've lived till now. I tell them I don't know.
Rupert Evelyn, ITV News, Gloucestershire.
That's it.
Leaving you with a warm feeling for a Friday night. Right, Alistair Stewart will be here with the news at 10. From everyone here, bye-bye.